It was a Tuesday. Just a Tuesday. Maya was sitting at the kitchen island eating cereal she didn't taste, scrolling through her phone without reading anything. Her mom was somewhere upstairs getting ready for work. The house smelled like coffee and the lavender candle Diane always brought when she came over. Diane, her mom's best friend since college. The woman who had been at every birthday, every graduation, every Thanksgiving where someone cried before dessert. The woman who called Mia kid until Clear's throat. Maya was 23 and asked her to stop. The woman who 3 weeks ago had looked directly into Maya's eyes in this exact kitchen and whispered something that Maya had not been able to stop hearing since. Her roommate Rachel had texted that morning, just checking in the way Rachel did. "How are things at your mom's? Is it weird being back?" Maya had stared at the message for a long time. Then Rachel sent a second one. "Also, do you like her? Diane actually like her?" Maya put the phone face down on the counter. She picked it back up, she put it down again. Her cereal went soggy, the candle kept burning, upstairs. Her mom's heels clicked against the bathroom tile. Mia still hadn't answered. She didn't know how. Here's what Maya knew about herself at 24. She knew she was good at starting things and terrible at finishing them. She knew she made excellent coffee and burned everything else. She knew she had spent 3 years in Boston trying to build a life that felt like hers. And when it fell apart, the job, the apartment, the relationship that had always been slightly off in a way she couldn't name. She had come home to Connecticut with 2 suitcases and the specific shame of someone who thought they had already figured things out. She knew she loved her mom genuinely, not just technically, and she knew that Diane had been part of what home meant for as long as she could remember. Diane Calloway, 51 years old, architect, the kind of woman who walked into a room and adjusted it just by being in it. Not loudly, not deliberately, just by presence alone. She had short dark hair with silver starting at the temples that she had never once considered hiding. She wore linen in the summer and flannel in the fall, and she always smelled like cedar and something warmer underneath that Maya had never been able to name. She and Maya's mom, Carol, had met freshman year of college. Roommates first, then best friends, then the kind of clothes that survives decades in distance, and all the ways people change without warning. When Maya's parents divorced, Maya was 11. Diane had been the one sitting on the couch when Carol came home from the lawyer's office. She had stayed for 3 days. She had made soup. She had driven Mia to school every morning that week, and never once asked Mia to explain how she was feeling, which was the most merciful thing anyone had ever done for her. Maya had loved Diane the way you love a piece of furniture that has always been in the house. Comforting, familiar, present without demanding attention. That was before Maya came back home 2 months ago and started noticing things she had never noticed. Or maybe she had always noticed and had no context for what noticing meant. She wasn't sure anymore. That was the problem. She was no longer sure what she had always known and what was new information about herself. Carol was warm and busy and slightly chaotic, a high school vice principal who brought her work home every night and managed stress by reorganizing things that didn't need reorganizing. She loved Maya with a completeness that had never been in question. She also worried in a way that took up a lot of air in a room, and coming home had meant learning to breathe inside that worry again, to not take it personally, to remember it was love in a different shape. Diane came over twice a week, sometimes 3 times. She and Carol had standing plans. Dinner on Thursdays, a walk on Sunday mornings, and since Maya had been home, those plans had expanded, naturally to include her. No one made a decision about it. It just happened. The way things happen between people who are comfortable with each other. Maya had been comfortable. That was the word she would have used 6 weeks ago. Comfortable. She did not use that word anymore. It started with a Saturday afternoon in late September. Carol had gone to the grocery store. Diane had arrived early, as she sometimes did, and Maya had let her in without thinking about it. They had sat on the back porch with iced tea, and the light had been coming through the maple tree at the edge of the yard in that specific fall way, golden and slightly heavy, like it was aware of its own ending. They were talking about nothing important, a podcast Diane had listened to, a neighbor's new dog, whether the maple needed to be trimmed before winter. And then Diane said something that made Mia laugh, a real laugh, sudden and unguarded. And when Mia looked over, Diane was already looking at her. Not in any particular way, just looking. The way you look at something you find genuinely pleasing. She looked away first. Maya kept laughing for a second, then stopped. Something had shifted in the temperature of the afternoon, and she didn't know what to do with it. So, she went inside to refill her glass and stood at the kitchen sink for a moment longer than necessary, looking at her own hands under the running water. "Stop it," she told herself. She didn't know what she was stopping. She went back outside. The afternoon continued. Carol came home with too many groceries, and Diane helped carry them in. And everything was exactly as it had always been, except Maya noticed for the first time the specific way Diane listened. Not politely, actually. The way she turned her whole body slightly toward whoever was speaking. The way she didn't reach for her phone. The way she asked questions that proved she had been paying attention all along. Maya noticed that she noticed this. She filed it away under nothing. The following Thursday, Diane stayed late. Carol had fallen asleep on the couch by 9. She always did on Thursdays, the week catching up to her, and instead of leaving, Diane had stayed in the kitchen with Maya. They had done the dishes together. There was no particular reason for this. It was just the natural continuation of the evening. The kitchen was small. They kept almost touching, reaching past each other for the dish soap, for the drying rack, for the cabinet handle. Every almost touch that didn't happen registered somewhere in Mia's chest like a small specific pressure. At one point, Maya reached for the cabinet above Diane's shoulder. Diane didn't move out of the way immediately. She looked up at Maya. They were close, just for a moment closer than necessary, and said quietly, "There's a step stool under the sink if you need it." Maya was 5'7". She did not need a step stool. "I'm fine," Maya said. "I know," Diane said. And something in the way she said it made it sound like she meant something else entirely. Maya got the glasses down and put them away, and they finished the dishes in a silence that felt different from the silence before. Diane left at 10:30. Maya stood at the front window and watched her car pull out of the driveway, and then kept standing there for a while after the taillights disappeared. She went to bed. She did not sleep well. She told herself it was the coffee she'd had after dinner. The second week of October, Diane was helping Carol sort through boxes in the garage. Carol had decided suddenly to finally deal with 12 years of accumulated objects, and Maya had come down to offer help and ended up sitting on a folding chair watching the two of them work, because there genuinely wasn't room for 3 people in the organizational system Carol had invented. Diane was going through a box of old books. She pulled one out, looked at the cover, and held it up without turning around. "Maya, didn't you read this in high school?" It was a paperback copy of The Hours. Maya's name was written in pencil inside the cover. She remembered doing it. 14 years old, trying to make her handwriting look more grown up than it was. "Yeah," Maya said. "I loved it." "Me too." Diane turned the book over, looked at the back. "I didn't know Carol had it. I must have left it." Diane looked at her then, just briefly. "Some things stay even when we don't." She put the book in the keep pile. Maya looked at the ceiling of the garage for a moment, at the cobwebs in the corners, at the fluorescent light that had always flickered. She thought about what Diane had just said, and whether it meant anything, or whether she was in the middle of constructing meaning where there was none. She was good at that, constructing meaning. It had caused her trouble before. She was still thinking about it when she went to bed that night. She was still thinking about it the next morning. The thing about being home was that it gave Maya too much time to think. In Boston, there had been the noise of a city and a job that consumed her, and a life that was always slightly too full to examine closely. Here, there was quiet. There were evenings with no particular agenda. There were Sunday mornings when the house was still, and the light came through the kitchen curtains in a way that made it easy to sit with things that had no resolution. She started paying attention in a way she wished she could stop. She noticed that Diane always remembered what Maya had mentioned in passing. A book she wanted to read, a place she was thinking about applying, a thing that was worrying her, not in a way that felt like effort, in a way that felt like she had simply been listening the whole time, storing the information without being asked to. She noticed that when Diane laughed at something Maya said, it changed her whole face, not just her mouth, her eyes, her shoulders. Something in her posture released. She noticed that Diane never told Ma what to do, not once. Her mom loved her and worried and had opinions that arrived at full volume. Diane asked questions and then waited for the actual answer. It was a different experience of being known, quieter, more careful. She noticed that she thought about Diane when Diane wasn't there. Not constantly, not dramatically, just a background frequency. a low hum underneath the ordinary hours of her day. She would be doing something completely unrelated. Reading, folding laundry, walking to the coffee shop on Main Street, and a thought about Diane would surface without invitation. Something Diane had said, the way she had looked, the cedar and something warmer smell of her when she came in from the cold. Maya did not examine these thoughts directly. She treated them the way you treat a bruise, aware of it, careful around it, not pressing. And then the night happened. It was a Wednesday. Carol had a school board meeting, and Diane had come over anyway, because she sometimes did, because the house was open to her, the way only long years of friendship can make a house. Maya had been in the kitchen making dinner just for herself. Pasta and the good olive oil, nothing elaborate. And Diane had appeared in the doorway and offered to help. They had cooked together. It was not remarkable. Diane had cooked in this kitchen hundreds of times. Maya had cooked in this kitchen her entire life. But something about the combination, the two of them, no Carol, the early dark of October, pressing against the kitchen windows, music playing softly from Maya's phone on the counter, made the ordinary feel different. They were talking easily about Diane's current project, a house she was designing for a family in western Massachusetts. About what Maya might want to do next, the question she was still circling, about a documentary they had both independently watched and had opinions about. And then the pasta was done and Clear's throat. Maya was draining it and the steam rose up. And when she turned around, Diane was right there, closer than she had expected, reaching past her to turn down the burner on the sauce, and for 1 second they were inches apart. And Diane looked at her, not briefly, for long enough that Maya had time to notice. The kitchen was warm. The music was still playing. Something in Maya's chest was doing something that she did not have a word for, and was not going to find one for right now. Then Diane stepped back. She picked up the wooden spoon and stirred the sauce without comment, as if nothing had happened. As if the moment had no dimensions worth acknowledging, Mia turned back to the pasta. They ate dinner at the kitchen table, and the conversation continued, and everything was fine except Mia's hands were not entirely steady. She kept them in her lap as much as possible. Later, much later, when the dishes were done and Diane was putting on her coat to leave, she paused at the kitchen doorway. Maya was still at the counter, and Diane looked at her with an expression that Maya could not read at all, careful and quiet, and something underneath that she was not showing fully, and said barely above a speaking voice, "Your mother can never find out." Maya went completely still. "Find out what?" she said, but her voice was not quite steady either. Diane held her gaze for a moment that lasted several of them. "That you're unhappy here. She said she would carry that. You know she would." She left. Maya stood in the kitchen for a long time. She told herself that's what Diane meant, that it was concern and friendship and looking out for Carol the way Diane always had. She told herself this convincingly enough to get through the rest of the night. She told herself this for 3 weeks. She had not yet answered Rachel's text. But before we continue, if you made it this far, it's because something in this story touched something you know. That feeling of noticing someone in a way you weren't supposed to. The fear of what it means. The impossible weight of a sentence that could have meant everything, or nothing at all. Hit that like button right now. It helps me keep bringing stories like this one to you. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe and turn on the bell. That way, YouTube tells you when a new story drops on this channel. Now, tell me in the comments, have you ever had a moment where someone said something simple, and you couldn't stop replaying it, trying to figure out what they actually meant? Tell me about it. I read every single one. And where are you watching from today? Drop your city. I'll heart it now. Back to Maya and Diane. 3 weeks. 22 days of Maya moving through the house, like someone navigating around an object she had decided wasn't there. 22 days of Thursday dinners and Sunday walks, and conversations that felt on the surface exactly like all the conversations before, except that Maya was now aware of her own pulse in a way she hadn't been before, aware of the specific weight of the space between her chair and Diane's, aware of when Diane's attention landed on her and the duration of that landing. 22 days of telling herself that the thing she felt was manageable, familiar, something she had a name for. She didn't have a name for it. She had been very deliberately not looking for one. It was a Sunday morning, the first real cold snap of November, when it became impossible not to look anymore. Carol had twisted her ankle on the walk. Not badly, not a hospital situation, but enough that she was done and needed to go home and elevate it. She sent Maya and Diane ahead, The way she sometimes engineered things without appearing to, the way mothers do when they think they are being subtle. So Maya and Diane walked. The park was almost empty. The trees had mostly given up their leaves by now. The air had that specific November quality, sharp and clean, and carrying a faint smell of something burning somewhere, leaves or firewood, that feeling of a season committing to itself. They walked in a silence that had become over these weeks its own language, comfortable and uncomfortable in the same breath. The kind of silence that means something is being held on both sides. "You've been quieter," Diane said. Not an accusation, just an observation, offered carefully. "I'm a quiet person," Maya said. "You are," Diane agreed. "But this is different." Mia looked at the path ahead of them. A woman walked a dog in the distance. A leaf came down from somewhere, spiraling. "I've been thinking," Maya said. "About what?" "About what you said 3 weeks ago in the kitchen." The silence that followed was different. More weight to it. "What about it?" Diane said. Her voice was even careful in that particular way. Mia had come to recognize the way Diane was careful. When something actually mattered, Maya stopped walking. Diane stopped beside her. "You said my mother could never find out." Maya turned to look at her, and then you told me what it was she couldn't find out. And I've been trying to believe that for 3 weeks, and I don't think that's what you meant. Diane looked at her, not away. Not at the path or the trees or the middle distance. At Maya directly. "What do you think I meant?" she said. It was a real question, not a deflection. She actually wanted to know what Maya had understood. Maya felt something in her chest loosen and tighten at the same time. "I think you meant." She stopped, started again. "I think you noticed something about me, and you were saying that it had to stay between us. Because my mom is your best friend and she doesn't know." And she stopped again. "And I don't know what to do with any of this. I don't know what this is. I don't even know how to talk about it, except that I can't keep pretending I'm fine. And I don't know what fine would even mean right now." She was not a person who gave speeches. She had surprised herself. Diane was quiet for a long moment. The woman with the dog had disappeared around a bend. There was no one else in sight. Just the trees and the cold and the particular quality of November light, gray and generous. "How long?" Diane said. "How long? What? How long have you been not fine?" Clear's throat. Maya thought about it honestly. Not the easy answer, the honest one. "I think I've been not fine for longer than I know," she said. "I think some of it is just being back and figuring out what I actually want from my life. But some of it is," she looked at her own hands. "Some of it is specific to this." "To what this is," Diane said. "Yes." Another silence. Diane looked at the path ahead, then back at Maya. "I need to tell you something," Diane said. "And I need you to understand that I have thought very carefully about whether to tell you this." Maya waited. "I noticed," Diane said. "You're right that I noticed, and what I meant in the kitchen." She paused, chose her words with that same carefulness she brought to everything. "I meant that there was something happening that your mother was not going to see coming, that she would need time to understand. And I didn't want you to carry that alone. I wasn't." She stopped, looked at Maya steadily. "I wasn't only talking about you." The cold air moved between them. Maya understood what that meant. She understood it in her body before she understood it anywhere else. The way understanding sometimes works, landing in the chest before the mind catches up. "Diane," she said. "I know," Diane said quietly. "I know what this is. I know what it costs. I know that Carol is my best friend and that this is the most inconvenient thing either of us could have arrived at. And I am not asking you for anything. I'm not suggesting anything." She held Maya's gaze. "I just didn't want to let you believe you were alone in something that I also." She stopped. "I just didn't want that." Maya looked at her, Diane who had been part of home for as long as home existed. Diane with her silver temples and her cedar smell and the way she listened like it was a choice she made every single time. Diane who was standing in the November cold, telling her something true at significant personal cost. "What do we do with this?" Maya said. "I don't know," Diane said. And there was something almost relieved in her voice, like the question itself was progress. "I honestly don't know." They stood there for a moment longer, then Diane said, "Can we keep walking?" "Yeah," Maya said. They walked. They walked for another hour. They talked about it. The way you talk about something real imperfectly with stops, and starts with the occasional detour into something easier before coming back. They talked about Carol, because Carol was the center of this, and there was no way around it. About what she knew and what she didn't, and what her knowing would mean. They talked about what it meant that this had been growing quietly for weeks, without either of them naming it. A doubt whether the naming made it more real or just more visible. They didn't make any decisions. That wasn't what the morning was for. What it was for was this, the ending of a pretense that had been costing both of them something they hadn't fully calculated. Maya felt by the time they turned back toward the park exit a specific kind of tired that she recognized as relief, wearing a heavier coat. The kind of tired that means something has been set down, something that had been carried at a specific internal angle that made it feel weightless until it was gone. They did not touch. They walked with a normal amount of space between them, but the space had changed. It felt chosen now rather than careful, more honest. When they got back to the house, Carol was on the couch with her ankle elevated and a cup of tea and a documentary she'd put on already. She looked up when they came in, pink-cheeked, cold-edged, something between them that Carol's eyes registered without naming. "You two were out a while," Carol said. "It was a good walk," Diane said. Carol looked at Maya. "You okay? You look like you've been thinking too hard." Maya laughed, a real laugh, sudden and unguarded. Clear's throat. "I've been thinking the right amount," she said. Carol looked satisfied with this and turned back to her documentary. Maya went into the kitchen to make tea. A minute later, Diane appeared in the doorway. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The kitchen was warm. The documentary played softly from the living room. Carol's voice carried through once, commenting on something, the way Carol always did. Maya turned and looked at Diane. "I don't know how this goes," she said quietly. "Neither do I," Diane said. "That's," Maya turned the word over. "That's actually the most honest thing. I know." "Okay," Maya said, and it meant several things. It meant she wasn't running. It meant she understood the shape of what this was going to require. The patience and the care and the specific courage of wanting something that comes with real consequences. It meant she was not pretending anymore. Diane looked at her with that expression, careful and quiet and no longer hiding the thing underneath. "Okay," she said back. The tea kettle started to heat up. In the living room, Carol laughed at something on the television. The sound came through warm and easy, the sound of someone at home. Maya and Diane stood in the kitchen, not touching, not speaking, the sound of something beginning. Love. Maya had spent 2 months coming home and not knowing what she was looking for. She had thought she was looking for direction, a next step, a version of herself that fit better than the one she'd been wearing. She hadn't expected to find it in this kitchen. In November, in the specific and terrifying honesty of naming something that asked a lot of everyone involved. But here is what she understood now, standing in the warm kitchen while her mother laughed in the next room. Love does not wait for convenient timing. It does not arrive in tidy circumstances. It shows up in the places you weren't watching, in the people who were already there. In the moments when you are too tired to keep performing the version of yourself that does not want what it wants. The courage isn't in the certainty. It's in staying in the room after the truth has been spoken. If this story touched something in you, something you've been sitting with, something you recognize, write love in the comments. So I know you made it here with us. And if you want to stay in this world of stories that don't look away from the complicated, beautiful, difficult truth of what it means to feel something real, click the video that's coming up on your screen right now. A big hug, and until the next story.